Okay, so in this demo here, I'll show how a user of the ext designer, which we see here, can use RESTX to create some web services which were missing for a project they were working on. This user here already is using two RESTX resources to get information from Salesforce and information from a local database store. These two data stores were created, and they refer to this here on the RESTX server side. So we look at the RESTX component. This one here gets us information from Salesforce, the email and the account name field from our contact database on Salesforce. If you click submit here, you get a resource which, when accessed, returns you this sort of information. Right? You see the account name and the email for all of our entries. There are quite a few in here. Then we have another data source, which is a local database. We configure here a resource which gets us access to our customer database. We click submit, and this is the sort of information we would get in return. We see a number of fields about each customer and also an email. We also see an email here in the Salesforce data. So anyway, so the user of the ext designer has created these two stores which access the URLs of these services and two grid elements. One of them shows us the Salesforce data already because it's associated with the Salesforce data store, this one here, the Salesforce store, and the second grid is associated with the local store, which gets us information from the local database. See, we see this here. And now the designer realizes that, I need to have another grid here where I can see information from both of the tables together. Now, the developer has the option of doing the join in the front end by pulling both pieces of data into the browser, into JavaScript, and performing the operation there. But of course, that's not very efficient because potentially very large pieces of data have to be streamed to the client. Would be better if this would be done on the server. But let's say the backend team is busy right now. Fortunately for this developer, there's RESTX. So the developer goes and uses our join component to create a new resource. Joined data, we calls this. Data joined from Salesforce and our SQL database. The field on both elements is email. That is a key field on which we want to join. And all he has to do is specify the URLs of these two resources, one for the Salesforce, one for the local one. And this join component then will go and access this. So these become parameters to this join component. Click submit, and if you then access the resource, you get join information. These fields come from the local database. This one comes from Salesforce. So let's assume the developer has done this just with a web browser. Just took a few seconds. It was really easy to create this, as you can see. It's not very difficult. So what do we do now? In the ext designer, he's creating a new store. We call this store maybe we call it the joint store. And we need to make sure that this is properly named here, joint store. And also in here, we go and need to specify the URL from where the data is to be had. And that is exactly this URL here. We can just copy and paste it because this data will be received in proper format. And then we need to add fields. That unfortunately just takes a little bit. It just needs to be done. So one, we need to add the email field, then the first name field, the last name field, the total field, and finally this new field that comes from the joint, which is the account name. So now we can say load this data, to wait a few seconds, and we will see in a moment a message that 4 records have been created. Those are the records that are the result of the join. Now we can go to components and create a new grid. The quickest way to do this here is to simply take this one, duplicate it, and say to this one we are going to use this new store, which is the joint store, 4 records, and we just need to add a single field, a column. And this column we are going to call, the data index first of all is going to be the account name, and the field itself, we can give it a header here, column, we just call it account, and we need to, of course, the ID of the store. We need to just double check that. Joint store. Okay, so there you are. Now the account has been created, the account information is there, and for some reason, account name, for some reason I can't see it. That is a bit annoying. Oh, because I have two E's here. There you go. So there we have it. Now the designer, the user of the front end of the ext designer here has created themselves a new data source simply by going to the web browser, accessing RESTX, and creating themselves a new source. And here it is, the result of all this information.